Hi, everybody. My name is Jim. Can you hear me? Hi, everybody. My name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. I usually don't speak with a microphone. If anyone knows me, which you guys don't, but Michael and Jeff do, I very rarely need a microphone. Like Michael said, my husband and I just moved from New York. Long Island, specifically. Wow, everything went out. I do not have a venereal disease. I never have. That's an ugly rumor that went around. Actually, everything that I thought I was going to say is completely gone now. It's so nice to see so many smiling faces. I see not one face. This whole thing has got me freaked out. Right now I'm very nervous. I haven't been to an open meeting since COVID started. I went to the Big D Roundup and I could barely do it for the couple of hours that I was there. I've been trying to be as careful as I could with this whole pandemic, and for me it's very odd because I'm a blabbermouth. I'm very social, and I've always had lots of friends. Growing up, I grew up on a dead-end street. The people across the street from us had 5 kids. My parents had 5 kids. The people over the fence, I grew up in suburbia, right over the fence, they had 6 kids. They had 5 kids. People down there had 5 kids. And we were on the dead-end street, so all the baseball games, all the activities were on our street. So it was a whole neighborhood of, good Catholics or horny Protestants, depending on how you want to look at it. It was, everyone was in and out of everyone's houses. Nobody locked their doors. Long Island in the 60s and 70s. And, it was kind of, the American dream, I guess. My father worked for the phone company. My mother stayed at home, just like everybody else in the neighborhood. All the other parents had the same dynamic, Fathers worked, mothers stayed home, the kids ran the streets. Halloween's coming up. Halloween in our neighborhood was get home from school, change out of your clothes, change into your costume. You're gone until 6 o'clock, come home at 6 o'clock, depending on what day of the week it was. If it was Friday, we had fish sticks. If it was any other day of the week, we probably had pizza, and then out till 9 o'clock. There was no driving the kids around. There was no walking with the kids. It was, just out, just on your own with, piles of kids from the neighborhood. And it was, it was nice. We had the woods down the block from our house, and, we'd hang out in the woods. We'd light fires. We'd do what we did in the woods. We'd beat up each other, whatever happened. In my household, there were 5 of us. The first 3 were 11 months apart, and then a year and 11 months, and then 6 years. I was 4 out of 5. I'd like to say I was the favorite, and it would be the truth. I was the favorite most of the time until I wasn't. My parents drank and smoked like all the parents in the neighborhood did. We had a built-in pool in the backyard that when my grandmother died, she left some money to us, and that's what my parents did. They put a dormer on the house, and they put a pool in the back. So our house became kind of party central. A couple of the other neighbors had pools, but my parents liked to party, and they liked to give parties, and they liked to entertain. And that was a lot of fun. It was a good time. It was fun until it wasn't, I can remember, the 4 of us being lined up on the stairs listening to the fights in the middle of the night. My father would drink every day. My mother probably drank every day, although I wasn't so aware of it because my mother always drank out of a coffee mug. I suspect she went right from coffee in the morning to Manhattans in the afternoon in the same mug so she didn't have to wash a glass. I can remember being about 9 or 10 and learning how to make a Manhattan, 2-to-1. So my father would bowl on Tuesday nights, he would have softball on Thursday nights, and he would be out on Friday nights. Friday nights were usually the problem nights. Bowling and softball nights were usually okay because there was work the next day. But Friday nights, there wasn't work the next day. And my father would very often show up at home, either without his car or with his car and the configuration of the car rearranged, let's say. My father never had a car that had the same color front end on it as the rear end. As my brothers got older, so I was 4 out of 5, and as my brothers got older, my father started blaming the car accidents on my brothers. His friends would come over and they'd say, "Rod, what happened to your car?" The kid, he took it out, and that's when I really started realizing there was something wrong going on here. I mean, it's one thing to do something, it's another thing to start blaming it on your kids. Right around this time, we were all getting a little older. There were always fights in the house. My father was getting increasingly more violent in the house, and we were getting dragged into it more and more. Now there wasn't just fights between my mother and father. There was fights between my mother and my father, and then my father and my brothers, and then it was just becoming a brawl. So needless to say, I saw both sides of the coin growing up. I saw how much fun alcohol could be and how much devastation it could do at the same time. For some reason, for me anyway, there was this disconnect. I mean, intellectually, I knew it was the same thing that was causing both situations, but I didn't realize it, if that makes any sense to you. So when I first started experimenting with alcohol, I didn't even consider the fact that there would be anything but fun happening, I was 12 years old. It was the summer between 6th and 7th grade that I picked up Marlboro Lights, Schmitz beer, and pot. It all happened in those woods down the block from my house. And I thought it was great. It was just so good. I can remember my friend Patty and we grabbed a couple of Schmitties out of her father's refrigerator that he kept in the garage, and we rode our bicycles to the woods, and we each had one, and we cracked them open, and we drank them, and there were these big, giant piles of sand, dirt, whatever it was. They were digging up the baseball fields at the time, and I can just remember drinking down that beer and getting up on the top of that pile and just feeling like I was literally on top of the world. It was just such an amazing feeling. And, I knew I was going to do it again. I absolutely knew I was going to do it again. And then at the same time, kids around the block started smoking weed, and somebody introduced it to me. I can remember smoking my first joint in the bushes. In the bushes up against a neighbor's house. And just kind of crawling out, literally on my hands and knees, crawling out of the bushes, like it was a little bat cave or something, crawling out of the bushes, stoned. And I was just like, wow. You know, it was just so great. I finally, you know, I don't ever remember being like a nervous or an anxious kid, but when I started doing this, I remember feeling better. You know, I definitely felt different, and that different was much better than the way that I was feeling before. And I just absolutely loved it. So at 12 years old, you know, throughout my entire life, I've always been not quite as tall as everyone else. And, you know, for the very longest time, I was extremely thin. And I always looked, you know, very many years younger than my actual age. Not so much anymore, but that's fine. Anyway, so at 12 years old, I looked like I was 8 or 7. It was just ridiculous. And of course, you know, my brothers were doing the same things that I was doing. But I always got caught for some reason. I always got caught. I remember, you know, the first time I got caught, you know, so going to school, we would, you know, everyone would meet at the corner for the school bus. We took the school bus. And there would be tons of kids at the school bus. You know, we'd have games of soccer. We'd, you know, do all kinds of things. It was like an entire day went on before you got on the bus. Half the time, we'd get to school and we'd look like we had put in an entire day. So, you know, this friend of mine from around the block, we decided we were going to meet before school, before the school bus, smoke a joint, and then go to school. But being 12 years old, you know, that whole, you know, the brain wasn't fully functioned yet. Plus, I was already stoned. And so we decided to meet and smoke a joint. And I don't know what possessed us to go back home before we went to the school bus. Why we didn't just go to the school bus, I don't understand. But I went home, and my mother was standing in the kitchen, and she's like, "Where were you?" And I was like, I went for a walk. I'm a 12-year-old kid. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I got to go to the school bus. Why would I be going for a walk? You know, it just didn't make any sense. Well, who were you walking with? Kenny. Why? Oh, I don't know. John, come here. Smell his breath. That's one of my older brothers. What does this breath smell like? Oh, yeah, Ma, it smells like pot. And I literally saw my mother fall over because she thought we were smoking ciggies. She had no idea. And my brother ratted us out for smoking weed. And I had to sit. So the first thing she does is she gets on the phone with the other kid's mother. Now, by this time, the school bus has come and gone. So there's no school today. My friend has now gotten on the school bus. My brothers are listening to what's going on. They're about to get on the next bus. So my mother calls the neighbor, oh, Marion, do you know what the kids have been doing? They've been smoking weed. So it's like this giant thing. So Kenny gets on the bus. He goes to school. He's stoned in school now, knows he's gotten caught, but his mother hasn't gotten him yet because he's in school. So he's got to go all through school knowing that when he gets home, he's going to get screwed. So my mother sits me on the couch and proceeds to start making phone calls. So she's on the phone. Oh, this is a rotary phone for those of you that don't know. It's attached to the wall, and it's got like a 40-foot cord so you can walk around the whole house with it. So my mother's doing loops around the house with the phone, calling, you know, all her girlfriends in the neighborhood. So now everybody in the neighborhood knows. Calling my aunts and uncles. She's on the phone for like the entire day. And I'm just stoned on the couch like this, watching a TV that's off for 6 hours. So that was the first time. So now that I've gotten caught, my brothers no longer need to hide it, because now they can leave their crap laying around and I'm getting blamed for it. So my mother finds a skull bong. It was the 70s, no judgment. A skull bong like this big that my brother Robert has. I'm like, Ma, that's not even mine. I don't want to hear you lying to me. But I'm not. And that's how my junior high school and high school days went on from that day until I graduated. It was just a series of getting caught, getting in trouble, and just going on, saying, I'm not going to do it again. I promise I won't do it again. Actually meaning it most of the time, and then doing it again. So looking back now, then I didn't know anything, but looking back on it now, I realized how powerless I was over it right from the beginning. For me, it wasn't, I was thinking about this earlier today, so for me anyway, because I look so young, and I was young, I was, 12, 13, 14 years old, it was easier for me to get pot and other drugs than to get alcohol because, my pot dealer didn't card us. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't care. When you'd go and stand in front of the deli and you look like you were a 9-year-old standing in front of the deli with a roll of quarters from your paper route, asking some 30-year-old to buy you an 8-pack of Miller Quickies, it looks a little suspicious, I guess. Anyway, so, I would go out on Friday nights and we'd get a bunch of us together and we'd go in the woods and we'd go, we'd get like a half keg or a quarter keg and we'd go to the golf course. We'd go to the Bethpage golf course and we'd drop the keg in the woods. We'd all chip in. We dropped the keg in the woods and, this is New York in February. It's a little chilly. It's freezing cold. It's not a little chilly. It's freezing cold and there's snow on the ground. So we dropped the keg in the woods. We'd tap it. We'd start drinking. We'd get a little drunk. We'd get a little cold. We'd light a fire. So, of course, it's a state park and the cops running around on horseback because it's a golf course. You ever get chased in the middle of the winter in the snow through the woods, drunk, dragging a half a keg by cops on a horse? It's a lot of fun. Believe me, it's a lot of fun. So I'm thinking, I come into AA and I'm like, oh yeah, I was a social drinker. I drank with other people. I mean, how social is that, dragging a keg through the woods? Tons of fun. So, somehow I graduated from high school. I don't know how I did it. I just did it. My parents, by my senior year, had decided to get divorced, which was the best thing that they could have done for everyone involved. And, being a manipulator, having some decent upbringing, knowing how to say please and thank you and when not to use profanity. The first thing I did when my parents announced their divorce was go to my guidance counselor and say, I'm the product of a broken home. I have to support my family and I work. So my guidance counselor was like, okay, well, he rearranged my schedule so that I was getting out of school at 11:45 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and 12:30 on Tuesday and Thursday. And I told him I needed to do this because I was working to support my family since, my father was no longer in the house. All lies, Mrs. Acolytus, all lies. I just did it so that I didn't have to take the courses that I didn't want to take. all those elective courses that are supposed to be fun in high school, I had absolutely no interest in any of that stuff. School had become just a complete bore for me. It was something that I knew I couldn't drop out for some reason, but I just had no interest in being there at all. And I was stoned all day, every day through school. I was drinking whenever I could before school. I mean, whatever I could get my hands on. Got out of high school and, I should have had an idea that, somebody was watching over me or I don't know what. But, when I turned 18, they changed the drinking age to 19. And then when I turned 19, I was born in December. And for 1 month, I was allowed to drink legally at 19 until that January when they changed the drinking age to 21. So right there, I probably should have had a clue, but of course I didn't. Self-will run riot. So I got out of high school, and I've always worked. I've had a paper route since I was 11 years old. When I was 16 years old, I went and got a job in the mall at a bakery. So actually during high school, my last year in high school, I was a baker, and I used to go in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would bake until 7. The women would come in for the morning rush to open up the bakery. I would go to school, and then I would go back to the bakery at like 1 in the afternoon. And at this time, it was like 1983, and I just started hearing about this new virus that was hitting the gay community. I was 17, 18 years old, and, I started hearing news stories about it. And of course, I was out on Long Island, and this was primarily happening in New York City and other big cities. And, it didn't really register so much with me. I was young, I was gay, I was, had a boyfriend at this point. I always had a boyfriend. And, that was kind of in the background over here, floating around, but nobody really knew too much about it yet. And, I got out of high school and I was working in this bakery, and I was going in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was, I would be partying with my friends, and I'd have to leave to go to work. And it was the 80s. There were lots of cocaine around. Lots and lots. And it was like I was not ready to stop partying. So it was, okay, come on, we're moving it to the bakery. So I'd open up the door, fire up the ovens, load up the bread, and we had these giant stainless steel tables. And sometimes you couldn't tell where the flour ended and other things began. And we were I was in a mall. The mall was closed. There was me, my stoned friends, a security guard, and a German Shepherd. And we had the entire mall to ourselves. We would bring in mini bikes and mopeds, and, we'd grab wheelchairs. We'd have races up and down the mall. It was kids in a candy store, It was actually surreal, the whole thing. It was just amazing that, I lived through any of this. But, when you're young and you're a kid and you kind of bounce back, I would go like days and days and days with just not sleeping, not eating. The mall would open at 8 o'clock in the morning, And the first thing I would do is go down to Nathan's and get a giant beer from Nathan's and a hot dog. And people were like, what is wrong with you? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I was like, no, it's your 8 o'clock in the morning. It's my 4 in the afternoon. I'm ready to party again. You know, everything was, my whole life at that point was just completely flipped upside down. I had been, I had been following the Grateful Dead for a couple of years, so we had been doing East Coast tours, and there was a lot of mushrooms and LSD involved, and selling peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and all kinds of, just crazy antics and mayhem, and, kind of not so much trouble. Every once in a while, a friend would get arrested, and you wouldn't see them for, a couple of months. They'd, go away for 6 months, 8 months. I had a boyfriend that did 1.5 years for a white-collar crime, falsifying time cards, which was bizarre to me. I was like, Michael, you don't do that. You sell drugs. It's just insane. It's just insane how things would happen. Things just happened. And, I started getting arrested, as does happen to people in these types of situations. And, I was out at a bar one night. It actually wasn't one night. It was one Sunday afternoon. It was a tea dance. And, we were doing a couple of lines in a car, and it was like the SWAT team came down on us. It was ridiculous little $0.5 gram. It was nothing. And me and the guy I was with, we got arrested. They kept his car longer than they kept us. They wanted that car. It was like a 43 Mercury convertible. He had this classic car. And, I started to realize I was dating this guy at the time, and my life was really starting to fall apart. I was, the cocaine was really taking its toll on me. I couldn't get myself to break like 95 pounds, soaking wet, and I just didn't feel well. I never had any money. I would wake up in the morning, and the first words that would go through my head were, shit, I can't believe I lived through the night. I wish I was dead. And I had lost my license a little while prior to this, and I was driving this 67 Mustang that was suffering from alcoholism. I mean, it was literally falling apart, and I was, going to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, me and all the other drunks on the road and the cops, and, it was the times when, driver's licenses in New York at that time were 2 parts, Part A and Part B, and it was literally 2 pieces of cardboard, and one side was for your convictions and the other side was your license. And my brother was on the police force. One of my brothers was a cop in New York City at this time, and he gave me a little badge to keep in my wallet, and I would get pulled over, and I had this poor little Mustang. It had snow tires on the front. It was just, I felt so bad I felt worse for the car than I did for myself, because I actually cared about the car at this point and didn't care about myself. And I had it wasn't registered. It wasn't inspected. There was no insurance. Like I said, it had, snow tires on the front, bald tires on the back. The leaf springs was shot. Its ass end was dragging on the ground. It was the outward appearance of what my insides were. It was, I took a box of Marlboros and stuffed it in the windshield because the inspection stickers were red and white at that time, thinking that this is my best thinking. That was my best thinking. So I guess I must have been watching like Starsky and Hutch or something. So I would get pulled over and I'd literally get 8 tickets at a time. And I'd open the glove compartment and shove them in the glove compartment. And I'd get stacks of tickets because, I'm going to the same place every night. I'm driving the same roads. I'm at the same time. Guess what? Cops have the same shift too. They have the same sector. And you see this Mustang coming down the road trailing sparks because the muffler's dragging. And it's loud as hell, not because it's cool, because the muffler's dragging. You can hear it before you see it. And I'm driving like that. You like the visual? I'm driving like this, and I look like I'm, 12 and a half maybe on a good day. And, now they start taking my license. So I'm giving them pieces of their license. So they take one part one night. Then they take another part the next night. Then I get pulled over and they take the car and they leave me. Then they leave the car, they take me. So it's this whole thing that's going on. We're running out of, now I'm calling my brother. And I'm at the station house, and the sergeant's calling my brother, and they're like, "Is this your brother?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's him." Well, come here. They're like, "Come here, pick him up, and beat the shit out of him because he's bothering us. He's really bothering us. He's gonna hurt someone, and this car can never be on the road again." And of course, you know what I do? I have the car. I can't have the car towed to where I live because it's where I live and you don't really want the people who you live with knowing what's going on. So I have the car towed someplace else. In front of, literally, I don't know whose house. I picked out an address close to my work and I said to the impound, I said, "This is where I live." And they just dropped it. I have no idea why they dropped it. But they did. They didn't ask for any kind of identification or anything. They just did it. But things are getting crazy. Because they were already crazy. So so this guy that I'm dating he's completely out of control. He's, just a larger than life personality. And when he drinks is just unbelievably. It's getting very dangerous. My life is getting very dangerous. So we decide that my mother had moved to Florida. We decided my brother Robert had moved to Florida. So we decided, you know what? Change of scenery. I'm going to move to Florida, get us set up, and then he's going to follow me. So I moved to Florida, and I get a job immediately. I'm working at Kmart, your Silver Springs Kmart. I'm running blue light specials. I'm actually doing okay because I've separated myself from the majority of the drugs, which I actually thought was the only problem I had because the alcohol was, God bless you, the alcohol was really the only thing that was holding me together. So I moved to Florida, and this guy suggests that, just go to DMV, motor vehicle, and tell them that you've never had a license and get a new license. And it's kind of like, I tried to call motor vehicle in New York and I could never get through. I'm sure Florida is not going to call and get through. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a felony. I didn't know. So that's what I do. Thank God I didn't change my birth certificate because that would have been really, really bad. Anyway, go in. I passed my road test, by the way. But the sheriff was waiting for me when I got back from my road test. And like I said, it's a felony. They don't like that. Got arrested. And by this time, I've really realized that I am not the type of person that is going to flourish in prison. I am way too small. I am way too suburban to be able to do that kind of life. So I get out on a credit card. I would like to say it was a borrowed credit card, but I'm sure it was a stolen credit card. These two little old women, they must have been 80-year-old bail bondsmen, show up at 3 o'clock in the morning and get me out. So that's the end of Florida. So Florida's done. Switch my probation back to New York. Go back to New York. Get back with this guy. Nothing changes. We break up like 15 times. You know, I start trying to live some kind of a decent life, and I just can't do it. I'm supposed to be off probation. I had a year. They put me on probation. If I didn't get arrested for a year, they would drop the felony charge. The day that I'm supposed to be off on probation is the day that I got arrested in that 43 Mercury. So, of course, I've learned my lesson once about lying. So they send me this affidavit to sign that I haven't been arrested in a year, and I don't sign it. I just ignore it. Anyway, little while goes by, and I call up this guy again because I'm a glutton for punishment. Can't stay away. Can't stop putting my hand on that hot stove. I call him up. He's living at his mother's house in Pelham. And I say, "Hi, it's Jim. Is Bill around?" And his mother says, "Oh, Jim, Bill's in rehab." I said, "Oh, what happened?" I'm thinking hip surgery. Oh, yeah. He's getting his alcohol taken care of. He's in Minnesota. I was like, okay, good, because he needed it. You know, always looking at somebody else, not myself. He started calling me from rehab and started sounding really good. And this guy was a mess. And you know, all the problems that I had with him through my entire life, you know, had it not been for him, I would not have come into the program. I was working at MCI, the long distance telephone company at the time. And I went to my supervisor and I said, Martha, I think I'm a drug addict. I think I need to, and I'm quitting. I can't work anymore. And she was like, ugh. So I left work. It was on a Friday. And the next day she showed up at my door at the apartment I was living in, which doesn't really sound like a big deal, except she was up in White Plains and I was on Long Island. And it's like not an easy way to it's not easy to get to. There are a bunch of bridges involved. Let's put it that way. And she showed up and she took me out to breakfast. She took me to a diner and she talked to me about the program. And I had all the excuses why I couldn't go to AA. I didn't have a license. I was too young. I wasn't bad enough. Alcohol wasn't my problem. It was drugs. And if I just stayed away from the drugs, I would be fine. Anyway, she had all the answers that I didn't want to hear. Everything that made sense to me. She said, just go there. Just go. Put your hand up. Tell them you're new. Tell them you don't drive. You need rides. She said, those people love that. They love to pick people up. I was like, oh, I didn't know what was going on. So that Tuesday, of course, I was very busy that weekend. Couldn't go that weekend. Very busy, very busy. But I did literally walked to a meeting that Tuesday night. It was not in a basement, although I've come to love church basements. They're my favorite. It was on the main floor in the auditorium of St. Thomas More Church in Farmingdale. And this guy, Matt, was celebrating 3 years. I tell you, for me, if you're an outsider and you walk in late to an anniversary meeting, it's fucked up. It really is. No idea what was going on. There were balloons. There were ashtrays. There were tables of people smiling and laughing. Ashtrays. We smoked. There was a blue haze this high over the entire room. And that side over there, no smoking. You know the smoke goes both ways, right? So I walk in, I sit down, I'm like trying not to get noticed. I'm looking around the room and I see one of my best friends from high school, her father. And this guy literally was a falling down drunk. And I saw him, I was like, oh no. So I'm there for like 45 minutes and all of a sudden, everything stops, everyone gets up and leaves. I'm like, what's going on? Coffee break. No idea. I'm like, what is this, theater? So, I turn to the guy next to me. Shows you where my head is at. I turn to the guy next to me and I say, you come here often? This is where I'm at. So he says, yeah, I've been coming for about 30 days. I was like, really, 30 days? Now remember, I'm at an anniversary of some guy who's celebrating 3 years. And I'm like, it doesn't register. 3 years can't register in my alcohol drug-saddled mind. 30 days I could wrap my head around. I was like, dude, how do you do it? He's like, well, I come to meetings and I sit here. I'm like, that's it? I'm like, nothing? He's like, no. So he gets me a meeting list and he circles on the meeting list. It was like a 15-page fold-out thing. It was like the New York Times. And he starts circling all these places and times. He's like, these are the meetings that I go to. This is where I'll be. At least, if you want to meet me there, whatever. And I'm like, oh, you're a little too fast for me. Plus, I'm looking at them, and they're in different towns, and I don't drive. And this is Long Island, no public transportation. There's a train line. So I look at the meeting list, and the next night, Wednesday night, I see that there's a meeting in Bethpage. We don't have Google. We don't have cell phones. We don't have anything. It's, my sobriety date is March 2nd, 1989. And, it's hard to look up things. It's really hard. I literally, to get the train schedule, went to the phone book. A phone book, for those of you that don't know, is this thing that they used to throw on your lawn once a year, and it had everyone's phone number in it. But it also had train timetables. It had the seating arrangement for the coliseums. It had a whole lot of good information. When I would get stoned, I would read the blue pages in the phone book. Just bizarre. So I took the train to Bethpage the next night, and I saw this guy, Ray, again. Not the guy that I was sitting next to, but the friend's father. And I went up to him and I said, Ray. And this was after that meeting. So I had started hearing about sponsors and, this was a double meeting. It was from 6 to 7:30 and then 8 to 9. So it was 2 meetings back to back. And I went through both of the meetings because it was a Wednesday night and I had nothing else to do. So after the 9 o'clock meeting, the 8 o'clock meeting was over, I went up to him. I was like, Ray, will you be my sponsor? He was like, no, absolutely not. He goes, but he will. Go ask him. So I went over to this random person that I had no idea who he was. And I said, hey, Ray told me to ask you to be my sponsor. Would you be my sponsor? By the way, my name is Jim. He said, oh, yeah, my name is Matt. Yeah, I'll be a sponsor. Do you know what a sponsor is? I said, no. The only time I've ever heard sponsor is when I had my confirmation. He said, okay. He went and he got me a big book, and he got me a 12 and 12 hardcover, and he wrote, inside the cover, he wrote, the way to live life lies between these pages. Learn to listen, listen to learn. And he became my sponsor. And he sponsored me for a year and a half. And, I love going to meetings right from the beginning. it was like binge watching my favorite Netflix thing. I couldn't wait to get back to the meeting to find out what happened to you guys, how you did it, what went on. And, you know, my first year and a half of sobriety sucked. It absolutely sucked. My life, I thought my life couldn't get any worse while I was using. It just fell to pieces. What was left of it was just in shambles. I still wanted to kill myself every day. Every day I woke up, you know, but I wasn't alone anymore. And I had hope. I saw you guys getting better. I listened to your stories. I saw you go through things and not pick up a drink. Most of the time I thought you were full of crap. I gotta admit it. But I believed. I believed something. And I just kept coming back. I would do 10 meetings a week. Saturdays and Sundays I would do double meetings. And, you know, Matt had this big old station wagon, and he would pick up a whole bunch of pigeons, and we'd go around and we'd do speaking engagements, and we'd go into Queens, and we'd travel all over Long Island, and it was absolutely an amazing experience for me. And, you know, we picked up chips together, 30-day chips, 60-day chips, 90-day chips. We did all our speaking engagements. You turned 90 days and you spoke for the first time. You weren't asked, you were told. You got your 90 days, you're speaking at an open meeting. The next open meeting we go to, you're speaking. The old timers would yell at us, tell us to, you know, take the cotton out of our ears and stick it in our mouths. They'd tell us we had nothing to say unless we were talking about gratitude. Don't open your mouth. You want to bitch about your parents? You want to complain about your job? You want to complain about anything? Complain to your sponsor. We don't want to hear it. You know, they were rough. I left very many meetings with homicide on my mind. But I wasn't thinking suicide anymore. I was thinking homicide, and they told me that was progress. Oh, you know, I absolutely love AA. Absolutely love it. I was introduced to a loving, caring higher power that is now my best friend. Don't leave home without him. And, you know, the experiences that I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous have just been amazing. I literally grew up in AA. I was 24 years old when I got sober, and I always like to say I was the youngest person in AA until I met Jeff. And then Jeff took all the air out of my balloon. You know, I've had sponsors. My sponsor's son was killed in Afghanistan, and he decided that he wanted to join the Army when he saw, as a 15-year-old, when he saw 9/11 happen. And, you know, when he got killed in Afghanistan, I watched her and her husband, how they, as two sober parents, go through this experience. And I thought to myself, I have nothing to complain about ever. I have lost my right to complain about the ridiculous minutia in my life. I watched them stand there for 16 hours in front of his casket and greet the entire community. We lived on the east end of Long Island, a tiny, tiny little community of 2,000 people, and they were actually on Shelter Island, which is even smaller. You know, to watch these two sober people go through that and not drink and not lose their minds, which was even more important. Through that experience, I became active. Chris became active in, you know, the Gold Star Families organization, and I had the wonderful privilege and opportunity to be able to attend a bunch of Gold Star conventions. these are the things that I would never have had any interest in doing. None whatsoever. I just could never think past my own 2 feet. I just never would have occurred to me. A couple of years ago, my husband and I got married in sobriety. Another thing that I, for very many reasons, never thought was ever going to happen for me. We got married and we started talking about making a move. And, this guy that I had dated very long ago and had basically 12-stepped me into AA from Minnesota while he was in rehab, had moved here. And we started considering the possibility of moving from there to here. And, my husband was, rightly so, pretty concerned about a giant move like that. I wasn't so concerned because I knew I had you guys. I, unfortunately, did not count on a global pandemic in the middle of my move. So, with God and AA, truly all things are possible. I haven't found a situation that I thought would get better if I drank or used, so I haven't. And I'm really, really grateful to have been here this afternoon, and to have gotten able to speak. Thank you, Michael.